My name is Harry Brown, and I've been serving with City Team for 39 years. Currently, I'm part of the international team that's training local leaders to launch disciple-making movements in over 50 countries around the world. I started with City Team back in 1974 as a counselor at their camp for inner-city kids. Most of the kids that came to camp were either African American or Hispanic, and almost all of them came from homes that were poor and dysfunctional. City Team's camping ministry had an incredible spiritual impact on these kids, but we soon found out that a couple weeks in the summer wasn't enough to see a real permanent change in their lives. We tried lots of things to help foster spiritual growth, but the bottom line is that what we were doing was not enough. It was too sporadic to give them what they needed. After a lot of soul searching, we decided to move into one of the communities that these kids came from so that we could understand where they were coming from and have consistent contact with them. The community that we chose is called East Palo Alto. This was a big step for my wife and I because both of us are white, middle-class backgrounds, and we were headed into a community that was predominantly African American, that was filled with crime and drugs and had the dubious title of being the murder capital of the United States. We lived in East Palo Alto from 1979 to 1984, and both of our daughters were born there. For those 5 years, this was our home. As expected, living in this community had its challenges. We were rejected because of the color of our skin. People called us dirty names and threw rocks at us, and even got to the point where hateful people were threatening to burn down our house in the middle of the night while we were sleeping. On top of all this, of the abuse and the threats, our house was robbed 5 times and we had 6 break-ins in the cars. Life was tough, but we believed that God had called us to help bring transformation from the inside out to this blighted community. So we stayed. We did everything we could think of to build relationship with kids and lead them to a saving faith in Jesus. We had sports clubs, Bible clubs, a high school Bible study. We took them on outings, events, camping trips, activities of every kind. It didn't take long before the kids really loved us and their very suspicious parents began to accept and even embrace us. The pace was frantic and the pressure of doing everything for everyone was intense. But we felt like we were making progress, so it all seemed worthwhile. When you first start out, it's hard to see what the long-term effects of your efforts will be. But now, looking back more than 30 years, I can see that I don't think you could have been more sincere or more sacrificial. But I do think you could be more strategic. A lot of the kids both heard and felt the love of Jesus. Many of them responded with saving faith. I even had the privilege of walking some young girls down the aisle for the father they never had. And some of those kids actually were named after us. Some wonderful things happened when we lived and worked in East Palo Alto. But honestly, we didn't change the community. Looking back now after 30 years, I know that we did the very best we could with what we knew at the time. But if I knew then what I knew now, I would have done things a lot differently. Here are just a few of the key lessons that I have learned from my time in East Palo Alto. Number 1 is build a prayer base first. We prayed and we got our friends and family to pray, but we didn't take the time to put a strong, well-informed intercession base in place before we launched our ministry. The second lesson I learned was build the ministry around local leaders. It's a lot faster to do things by yourself, but once you start down that road, like it or not, everything depends on you. The third thing is keep the main thing the main thing. Programs and activities are the beginning of the story, not the end. The real goal is to make disciples, but I found that most of what took up my time and my money didn't get me there. The fourth lesson is make things multiply. If you want to make a big impact that lasts, you have to do things that can multiply without you. Disciples making disciples, leaders training leaders, and churches planting churches. These are just a few of the lessons I learned in East Palo Alto. I hope they've been helpful to you. They certainly have been helpful to me.